Noticed my boyfriend growing close to a new coworker. Now she's moving into our building, and I'm questioning boundaries. I have been best friends with my boyfriend since 2013. We even lived together during graduate school for 2 years before we started dating. We started dating in 2016, when we were roommates, so we've been together for about 5 years now and have lived together for a lot of that time. We did a brief stint of long distance when we got jobs in different locations after school. In January of this year, he moved states to be with me, and I still can't get over how amazing that was of him. We are now living together again in our own apartment and we couldn't be happier. He is my best friend and absolutely the person I plan to spend the rest of my life with. He's smart, funny, an absolute sweetheart and a romantic, and he makes me feel so loved every day. We have talked about our future many times and am anticipating a proposal in the near future. Also, he has had many female friends during our time together and this has never bothered me. I'm rarely the jealous type. He's hung out one-on-one with girls before and I had no complaints. There has been one girl I told him I was uncomfortable with, and he stopped hanging out with her, but that was for a lot of reasons and not just because she's a girl. So on to the recent issue. After moving to my state, he had to pass a couple of tests in our field before he could start working. He did so and was able to secure a job in early June. He likes his new job so far, and generally likes and gets along with his coworkers, but he hadn't really made any real friends yet. He's hung out with my coworkers / sort of friends too. I'm also pretty new to the area, and likes them as well, but no one he would hang out with one-on-one. I know he is missing having a group of friends back in his home state where he moved from. About a month ago, maybe a little more, he started mentioning one coworker a lot. We'll call her Liz. At first it was just in passing, oh my coworker Liz said this or that. It also turns out Liz used to work with an organization that works closely with my organization, so she knows a lot of people that I work with and what's going on with my job and field of work. So it was a small world kind of thing. She would mention someone I knew, or something about my job, and he would tell her he also knew that person because of me, that kind of thing. But he started talking about her more and more often. I'm talking probably every single day over for a few weeks he would have a story about Liz or something that she said, so I knew they were talking or hanging out at work a lot. He did say that Liz mentioned she wanted to meet me, and she has a fiancé that she lives with. So that made me feel good. Nothing to worry about, and I was happy he was making a friend here. Liz actually lived nearby us, in a temporary place because they were moving around for her fiancé's job. So a couple of weeks ago he tells me that Liz suggested they start carpooling to work together. Their office is about 30 minutes away without traffic, but our city always has traffic, so it's more like 45 minutes each way most days. Honestly, this made me a little uncomfortable, since this meant they would be spending 5 hours alone together in the car every time they rode together. But I didn't say anything because they wouldn't be carpooling every day. Some days they work in the office and other days they work on projects around town, so this would only be days when they both go into the office, maybe 2 to 3 days a week. Besides, he only mentioned it in passing as an idea, at first. A few days later as he was headed out the door he said, okay, I'm going to go pick up Liz and head into work. I was surprised because he never told me they decided to definitely start carpooling together, but it obviously wasn't a big deal. He has never mentioned it again, so as far as I know that's the only day they've ridden together. It hasn't been an ongoing thing. I was fine with this. Things started intensifying quickly last week, though. As I mentioned, Liz and her fiancé were in a temporary place before, so they decided to start looking for a permanent apartment. My boyfriend casually mentioned to me one day last week that they were actually interested in our building, and that they wanted to come see it the next day. This came out of left field to me. Our building is very nice, it's a luxury building in a good area downtown, but there are also tons of similar buildings in the area. But I figured they were just checking out all kinds of places and ours was probably one of many on the list. So late last week they came by our building for a tour. I actually saw them briefly on the elevator and we met for the first time, but they were being given a tour by management so we didn't hang out. Well, later that night, Liz texted my boyfriend that they decided to rent in our building. I honestly didn't know what to say because I wasn't thrilled. I felt like now they will definitely want to start carpooling together every day they can, and they will start becoming even closer. My boyfriend was obviously very happy about it when he told me. I just kind of asked if they were looking at any other places and why they weren't looking any closer to where she and my boyfriend work, and he said they just really like this building and her fiancé works more closely to our area so it works for them to live here. Obviously there was nothing I could say so I just said cool. Ever since then I feel like they have already been talking more and more. They text and have called each other a couple of times. To be fair, as far as I know it has all been either work or apartment related. But I also don't really see his phone and have no idea how much they actually talk. A couple of final things prompted me to write this post. Up until now I wasn't thrilled about all of this but could deal with it. This weekend we traveled to visit my family for the holiday weekend. Yesterday during a family lunch, he got up and went into the other room with his phone for a few minutes. When he came back I asked where'd you go? And he just said I was getting a phone call. Later, I asked who was calling him at lunch. He said it was Liz with a few questions because they were moving in at the time. This slightly bothered me because I feel like if I hadn't asked, he wasn't planning to tell me it was Liz. Who called? He went back to our city last night while I'm staying in my hometown with my family for a couple of extra days. While driving him to the airport, I got a random thought, so I asked, "You're just going to take an Uber back home, right?" That's how we got to the airport. He kind of hesitated and then said I was actually going to see if maybe Liz could pick me up, so I don't have to spend money on an Uber. Yet again, I felt like he never would have mentioned this to me if I hadn't asked. Also, we live close to the airport, so an Uber is not expensive, and he makes good money. I reminded him that Liz and her fiancé were moving that day and probably did not want to come pick him up at the airport. I would have said this for anyone: moving sucks, and he thought about it and agreed. He didn't end up asking her. I don't know what to do from here. On one hand, I am genuinely glad he's making a friend. There are no red flags so far, things seem 100% platonic. Plus, she has a fiancé, so we could all be couple friends. On the other hand, he seems to be getting really close to her really quickly. He talks about her constantly, a lot more than I explained in this post. They are probably going to be riding together often, and I feel like he is starting to, unconsciously or not, kind of hide some interactions with her from me. Is it time to set boundaries? If so, what would reasonable boundaries even be? Is carpooling together too much? Is it okay for them to hang out alone together outside of work? I have no idea, and I've never been in this situation before. I don't know how to talk to him about this. I just feel like we need to have a talk now that she is living in our building, but maybe I should wait and see if things escalate? Update 1. A lot has happened since my last post, and I got some good advice there, so I wanted to post an update. After I made the last post, I came home from the trip with my family a couple of days later. I told my boyfriend that I wanted to talk to him about something, and I brought up his friendship with Liz. I basically brought up all of my concerns from the post. I told him that I didn't want to discourage him from having a friend, but I also felt like they were talking quite a lot and spending a lot of time together, and that it was starting to make me feel uncomfortable. My boyfriend took it really well. He immediately reassured me that he only saw her as a friend, and that he hadn't even realized how it could look to me. When I brought up how I felt like he wasn't being forthcoming with information, like how he didn't mention the phone call from her, he said that was 100% unintentional. He then immediately asked what he could do going forward to make me feel more comfortable. He offered to stop carpooling with her and to cut down on contact with her except for work-related stuff. I told him I didn't have a problem with the carpooling because financially it does make sense. He spends a lot of money on gas, but maybe he could try to text and call her outside of work a little bit less. I also told him I would really love to meet her and her fiancé, and he enthusiastically agreed. He set up a hangout for the following weekend. The two of us and Liz and her fiancé all went out for drinks at a bar by our building. I moved in by now. It was actually really fun. It turns out we all have a ton in common. Liz and I do very similar work, and we all have common nerdy interests. It was a little awkward at first, as meeting new people often is, but once we all got comfortable we had a blast. From there, we have all become fast friends, and Liz and I have developed our own separate friendship too. We text often, go over to each other's places for dinner sometimes, and hang out on weekends. I can honestly say I really like Liz, and her fiancé, as a person and trust her 100%. I no longer have a problem with her friendship with my boyfriend at all. They do still carpool sometimes, but they've never hung out alone outside of work. It's always the four of us. I feel like a huge weight has been lifted off my shoulders. Update 2. My boyfriend is now my fiancé. Less than a month after I made my last post, he took me out for a really beautiful and romantic dinner. When we came home, our apartment was covered in roses and candles. I was so shocked I could barely move as he got down on one knee and proposed. I said yes and then cried for about 2 hours as we called all of our friends and family. It was absolutely perfect, and we are getting married next year. It turns out that Liz actually helped him plan the proposal, and that was part of why they were talking a lot too. Since she lives in our building now, he had all of the flowers, candles, champagne, and accessories shipped to her and kept at her place until he was ready for them. He even had her hold on to the ring the week before he did it. After he proposed, she came upstairs and took photos for us and cried with us. That was the moment I realized what a great friend she is to both of us. Update 3. I didn't think I'd be back with anything more than wedding Pinterest boards and a story about how I cried at the florist, but the last few weeks got eventful. We set a date. We locked down a venue. Our apartment turned into a craft store explosion of linen swatches and sample invitations. Liz and her fiancé showed up at our door with a bottle of champagne and plastic flutes and did a goofy little engaged neighbors toast in our hallway like we were in a sitcom. It felt like we were all just settling into this new rhythm: work, wedding plans, neighbor dinners, until our engagement party on the roof of our building. It started as one of those perfect summer nights. The sky was pink, there were fairy lights threaded through the railings, and our friends took turns telling embarrassing stories about our grad school days. Liz's fiancé was a little quiet but fine at first. Then one of my fiancé's coworkers made a joke, something harmless like, "If these two didn't work together you'd have to pay them to hang out," which got a laugh, and the room shifted in that way where everyone is still smiling but all at once aware of tension. Her fiancé crossed his arms and, in front of everyone, asked my fiancé if he was enjoying the carpool honeymoon. It was half laugh, half dare you to deny. I think the wind actually changed temperature. My fiancé stayed calm and joked that he enjoyed not paying for gas. I put my hand on his back and tried to shift the conversation, but it didn't stop there. He made another comment about slippery slopes, and Liz's face did this thing where you can see a person begging someone with their eyes to just stop talking. He stormed off a few minutes later, leaving his drink sweating on the table. Liz was mortified. She pulled me aside and apologized 3 times in 30 seconds. I told her I was okay and that we'd figure it out tomorrow. We hugged and kept the party moving, but you know how there's a different soundtrack in your head when you're trying to be present and the whole time there's this buzzing of oh under everything? That. The next morning she came over in leggings and an oversized sweatshirt and said her fiancé had been stressed about work and money and feeling like he had no foothold in the city yet, and that the carpool thing pressed a very specific button for him. She asked if it would help him if they stopped carpooling for a while so it didn't become his focus. My fiancé didn't even hesitate. Of course, no problem, we'll drive separately. He also texted her fiancé a simple, very friendly message about wanting to keep things comfortable for everyone. It felt like an adult, mature resolution. Except it wasn't. 2 days later, her fiancé sent my fiancé a long text about boundaries at work, demanding, that he send him screenshots of his messages with Liz so he could see the context. My fiancé didn't respond for a few hours because he was on a site visit, and by the time he could, there were 3 more texts escalating into man-to-man talk and then I guess you can't be transparent if there's something to hide. He showed me everything. I felt that old prickle I had at the beginning, but for a totally different reason. This wasn't about our relationship anymore, it was about the way control can wear the costume of protectiveness. We agreed that he would loop his boss in. It felt dramatic, but we also didn't want to play telephone if anything at work got weird. His manager was so steady about it, just, thank you for flagging this, keep everything professional and documented, we'll support you if anything crosses lines. We all took a breath. I reminded myself that a bad moment at a party doesn't make a bad person. People say dumb things when they're scared. A week later, at 12:30 a.m., our door buzzer went off. I've never flown out of bed so fast. It was building security asking if we knew what was going on our floor because a neighbor had called about shouting down the hall. We opened our door to find her fiancé pounding on Liz's door, red-faced and slurring, calling her phone nonstop. Security got him into the elevator. Liz opened the door with tear tracks on her face and there was this moment where she just folded into my arms. On the way down, he tried to push back past security and dropped something that clattered on the tile, one of those novelty flasks shaped like a camera. When I say crazy, I don't mean dramatic in a fun way. It just felt messy and sad. The next morning was all coffee and logistics. She was safe, she didn't want to go back out with him waiting in the lobby, so we grabbed her a bag of essentials from her place and she slept on our couch with our elderly cat on her stomach like a furry paperweight. The building issued him a formal warning about harassment on the property. She kept whispering I'm so sorry, into a throw pillow and I kept telling her she didn't have to apologize for another adult's choices. My fiancé made eggs and we all just sat quietly like it had snowed in July and we were waiting to see if it kept falling. The part I didn't see coming came that afternoon. She showed me her phone, messages from his ex-coworker from back in their last city. It wasn't a we caught up for coffee situation. It was months of flirty texts that crossed the line and then sprinted 50 yards past it. He deleted names and tried to hide it under random contact labels, but she found a linked iPad while looking for her work notebook and everything synced in front of her like a glitching slot machine. Projection is such an ugly little magic trick. I think she'd known something was off and couldn't put a name to it until it lit up in her hands. She ended it. It wasn't theatrical. It was a steady, quiet, final voice I barely recognized, like she'd stepped into a room and closed the door behind her. He sent apologies and pages of explanations and a pressure cooker apology tour to all of us. No one yelled. She asked him to move his things out when she was at work. Building staff stood nearby. It was awful and practical and over. Work got awkward for a minute in that way where no one knows what they know. Someone, guess who, sent a message to HR alleging an inappropriate relationship. I think I held my breath for 3 days straight. HR pulled my fiancé and Liz in separately. They asked about timelines, projects, Slack chats. It didn't even feel personal, just checkbox human. Both of them were calm and factual, provided their messages, and explained that they've only ever hung out outside of work in group settings and that they'd stopped carpooling. Their manager vouched for their professionalism, and HR documented everything and, frankly, moved on. After that, my fiancé asked if he should put in for a transfer to a different project team to create space and prevent more drama. He didn't have to, their manager actually offered, and he accepted. It's an inconvenience, and it means different hours for a while, but I watched him make that choice without hesitation because he loves me and he loves his work and neither are worth fighting the wrong fight. Boundaries became very simple, very fast, not because I asked for them with a shaky voice in a kitchen, but because of reality. No carpooling, no late-night texts, group settings only, and a shared calendar so I never have to guess where he is. It wasn't reactive. It was deliberate, and it felt like a boundary we built together, brick by brick. In the middle of all of this, life kept happening. We went to taste wedding food and I cried over a beet salad. My mom and I had our inevitable guest list showdown and made up over cheesecake. Liz came with me to try on dresses because she'd promised me she'd be the one who would tell me if a dress looked expensive or if it just looked like a napkin. She stood behind me while the consultant clipped a sample to my waist, and she put her chin on my shoulder in the mirror and whispered, "You look like yourself." I asked her to be a bridesmaid right there in the dressing room with one shoe on. She said yes and laughed and then cried, and we both looked insane with mascara rivers and one heel between us. Her ex tried one more dramatic flourish, a nasty little anonymous comment on our wedding website about office romances, which my cousin caught within minutes because she runs our site, God bless her. We locked down the site to invited email addresses only, and that was the last ripple. It felt like picking up a vase that someone had bumped off a table and seeing it didn't crack after all. There were also these tiny, absurd pockets of normalcy that kept us all stitched together. The cat adopted Liz's hoodie as a bed. My fiancé learned to tie a bow tie from a YouTube video and then spent an hour tying one for Liz around a bag of frozen peas like he was the world's weirdest haberdasher. We had a Saturday morning where we forgot everything for 3 hours and made lemon pancakes and talked about nothing. Liz told her boss she needed to take a leave for a week to travel back to her hometown, and they let her, no questions. When she came back, she told us she'd been offered a lateral transfer to a different team in their company's downtown office with different hours and a completely different client slate. It felt like breaths we didn't know we were holding. She said yes. She also said she was going to start therapy regularly again and, separately, she was going to learn to build furniture, because she didn't want to be a person whose big life changes only involved crying and paperwork. She texted me a photo of a wobbly IKEA side table with the caption, "Step 1, not wobbly." Our relationship, the one that was the whole center of my first post, never felt like it was in danger during all this, which is a sentence I couldn't have imagined typing months ago when I had a knot in my stomach over a carpool. We practiced a kind of relentless transparency without it feeling invasive. I knew where he was not because I was monitoring him but because he wanted me to feel included in the texture of his day, and he showed me that with 100 boring, unglamorous choices, telling me when he got to a site, sending me a photo of the world's saddest vending machine lunch, asking me if I wanted him to pick up parsley on the way home. It sounds silly, but that's the glue. If you've been waiting for a dramatic, vindicating twist where I catch them in some compromising position and throw a drink in someone's face, I'm sorry. The crazy part was the way life turned left and then right and didn't ask any of us for permission, and how the person I worried about months ago ended up being the one sitting on my bed clipping my veil into my hair while my mom yelled up the stairs about whether we packed the cake knife. We just mailed the invitations. I pressed the stamps on with a damp sponge and wrote out our return address with a pen that kept threatening to smear, and my fiancé kissed my cheek every 20 envelopes like a timer. Liz is learning to sleep in her apartment without starting at every hallway noise, and she told me yesterday she stood in the sunshine on her balcony and felt like a human being again. We don't carpool. We don't need to. We go down to the lobby together sometimes and the doorman teases us because we're that couple who looks at the bulletin board like it's a museum. I won't pretend it wasn't messy. It was. But the mess didn't break us. It clarified things. It put everything in the light. I learned that I'm allowed to ask for the boundaries I need without apologizing for being dramatic, and I watched my partner not just agree but anticipate them, not performatively, but because he wants our life to be uncomplicated in all the ways we can control. And somehow, in a twist that would have made me laugh at myself 6 months ago, the girl I was worried about handed me a tiny packet of tissues and said, "You're going to be late if you keep crying over your own name on an envelope," and I believed her, and I wiped my face, and I went to meet the day we were making. Update 4. I thought the wild part of our lives had finally flattened into something domestic and boring in the best possible way. I was genuinely excited to have nothing new to report except that our oven runs hot and my fiancé says 5, 6, 7, 8 before we practice our first dance and then immediately steps on my toes and apologizes like he's just bumped into a stranger at the grocery store. We had a run of days that tasted like cucumber water and smelled like new candles. We went 3 nights in a row where the most dramatic thing that happened was me threatening our printer with a wooden spoon because it tried to munch an invitation. Then 2 things fell out of the sky on the same afternoon, one out of a blue iPhone alert, and one out of my email with the subject line "Important update regarding your event." I'll start with the first because it happened with my hair clipped on top of my head and a coffee stain on my shirt. I was on the treadmill in our building gym, trying to convince myself that an easy run is as virtuous as a hard one, when Liz walked in with a toad and the kind of glazed morning face we all wear when it's too early to be a person. We did our usual wave. 10 minutes later she shuffled over to the free weights and paused, eyes getting big at her phone. She mouthed "AirTag?" at me. I pulled my headphones down. Her phone was pinging that there was an AirTag traveling with her. I know there are perfectly normal explanations for that. Someone's keys left under a bench, the woman on the bike with her kid's backpack on the floor. But there was this slow roll of cold under my ribs. We looked around. The only other person there was a guy who works nights and reads on the bike with a towel over his head. The alert wouldn't tell her where exactly it was, just moving with you. She stood very still, like maybe the bag would confess if she didn't spook it. We took the toad apart on a yoga mat. Lip balm, wallet, crumpled receipt, half a pack of gum, a book with a cracked spine, a makeup bag, a tangle of headphones that could have been used as netting. Nothing. She turned the bag inside out. And there it was, a little white disc stuck in the seam under a flap of torn binding, secured with two angry little squares of tape like someone had been in a hurry. For a second neither of us breathed. Then she said very quietly, "I'm going to throw up," and I said, "Okay," and we walked into the hallway and sat on the floor between the elevator and the vending machine and just sat. I wrapped the air tag in 2 paper towels, then a plastic bag, like it was leaking and needed quarantine, because my brain does theater when it panics. We went straight to the front desk and asked them to pull whatever they could from the cameras. Our building manager is one of those women who could probably land a plane with hand gestures alone. She had it up on the screen within 5 minutes. We watched us go into the gym. We watched a delivery person come in with 2 florist boxes and a hand truck. We watched a guy tailgate behind him, hood up, head down. He peeled off toward the gym foyer. It was 10 seconds, a little comfortless ballet of casual evil. Our manager called the non-emergency line and then looked at Liz and said, "We're going to help you, okay? Stay with them downstairs while I print this." At the police station, the chairs made that squeaking protest when you sit and read signs that don't apply to you and count dead pixels on the TV. The officer who took the report was gently bored in a way that made me realize how many times he must hear "I'm sorry, this is so silly" out of women's mouths every day. He was calm and wrote down dates and times and took the air tag in its little paper towel cocoon. He asked if she had any orders in place. She didn't, not yet. He said, "Let's get you one." He said it the way a person says, "Let's go in out of the rain." Court the next morning was this birdcage of unfamiliar rules and fluorescent lighting. There were 2 other women my age with the same damp hair look you only get from a fast shower and no breakfast. When it was Liz's turn, I sat so still I thought my bones might hum. Her ex wasn't there at first. Then he was, late, trying to look mild in a button-down he hadn't ironed. He looked smaller than the idea of him, which I guess is true of a lot of monsters when they have to stand up in daylight and learn their lines. The judge had the kind of voice that makes you stop fidgeting. He read the report. He asked simple, boring questions, the kind of questions I now think of as life rafts. Do you feel safe where you live? Has he been told not to contact you? Do you understand the conditions? Her ex tried to talk about misunderstandings and boundaries and the judge held up his hand like he was turning down a radio and said, "Sir, this is not your time to speak." It took 10 minutes. He granted the temporary order. It was like watching a window open in a stale room. We got home. My fiancé met us at the elevator with that tight smile he does when he wants to fix the whole world and knows he can't. He made us grilled cheeses on the good bread with cheese that strings like a cartoon. We were just starting to taste food again when I opened my email and saw important update regarding your event from our venue. I swear to you I could tell it was bad news before I clicked, because it had the kind of polite punctuation that only appears when something you've paid a lot of money for is about to be taken away. There had been a sprinkler issue, a pipe had burst above the ballroom, and unfortunately, after evaluating the extent of the water damage, our team and the city have determined we will be closed for renovations through your date. We deeply apologize for the inconvenience and will be issuing a full refund within 7 to 10 business days as well as offering a list of preferred partners who may have availability. I made a sound, not a cry, not a word, something like the squeak the gym chairs made at the station. For exactly 3 minutes, I forgot how to inhale like a normal person. I slid down the cabinet and all the air in our kitchen went grainy. My fiancé sat on the floor with me and put his palm flat between my shoulder blades and counted me through it the way he does when the elevator stops too slowly and my brain decides we've been sealed inside forever. He said, "We will get married somewhere. I promise you, if we have to do it between the lemon tree and the laundry room, we will, and it will be perfect because you'll be there." If we'd had another week I might have mourned properly for the 100 little decisions I'd already made with that room in mind, the way the light looked at 6, the way the candles reflected in the weird modern painting by the bathrooms. We didn't have a week. We had 6 Saturdays left between then and the flat glossy date on our invitation. I called my mom. She went quiet in a way that meant she was sketching out options in her head on graph paper. I texted our bridesmaids and groomsmen. Group chat exploded in a way that made it look like fireworks, like a bad situation was suddenly an excuse to flood me with every emoji a phone can make. And then, because I believe in letting desire embarrass itself honestly, I emailed our building manager and said, "Is it completely insane to ask whether the roof is available?" It was insane. It was also possible. We had to get event insurance and a permit and a special rider for the little open flames of the hundreds of votives I'd ordered in a late-night fit months ago. We had to agree to a noise cutoff that would make our DJ cry a little and pay for a second security guard and put down a deposit that made my stomach do a small flip. We had to secure a rain plan that didn't involve simply wishing extremely hard. But it was possible. It would be the scene of the crime and the scene of the redemption all at once, the place where our engagement party had cracked at the edges and the place where it would be repaired. It was like the building wanted its own arc. The week after that was a montage made by a director addicted to coffee. Liz became a one-woman task force. She called a florist she used to intern for. "She can get peonies for not peony money, just trust me." She found a rental company that could get us a tent and a dance floor and 100 white chairs without scolding us for the timeline. She tracked down battery-operated fairy lights after I realized the roof outlets were in exactly the wrong places. She stood on the roof with a roll of painter's tape and mapped out our all like an architect and then ate a granola bar like it was a cigarette. HR emailed Liz a copy of the notice that the order had been served and documented. Our manager looped in building security, and they added her ex's photo to whatever internal list they keep behind the desk that I never thought about before I had to. She started therapy again with a woman who speaks gently and wears bracelets that chime, and after the first session she texted me, "I think I'm going to be okay," and then an hour later, "Also she says I should get more vitamin D, is it possible to get that from gummy bears?" She took apart her wobbly IKEA table and put it back together with this look of satisfaction that made me want to throw her a parade for doing something normal and finite. My fiancé's grandmother went into the hospital for a few days after a dizzy spell. He's close to her in a way that is the blueprint for how you want someone you love to be with the oldest person they know. He flew home on a Friday and sat by her bed and read her the fun parts of her old church newsletter, and then called me and said, "She keeps asking if she's going to make it to dance at our wedding," in that voice that breaks in the middle and then pretends it didn't. I kept thinking about timing in a new way, how everything we do is this apology to time, or a dare to it. We decided, on a Monday afternoon, to get our marriage license that week and have a tiny ceremony with her in the hospital chapel. It wasn't a secret elopement and it wasn't a dress rehearsal. It was a tether. We FaceTimed my mom and his mom, and they both cried and said, "Of course." Liz came over with a bouquet of white supermarket tulips she'd fluffed within an inch of their lives, and I wore a white dress I already owned and a pair of flats and a human amount of mascara. The hospital chaplain had a voice like a lullaby. His grandmother held both our hands in her small, thin ones and said she liked my shoes. We said words to each other that we will say again later in front of everyone we love, and it felt like writing a first draft in our bones. When we got back to the airport 2 days later, we added a tiny asterisk to our new favorite sentence about getting married on the roof. If you're keeping track, at this point we had a new venue that was also our building, a tiny marriage where the IVs beeped in time, an outstanding rain plan that required faith, and a network of friends who kept showing up like human post-its with solutions written on them. We also had a very determined cat who stole a spool of ribbon and unspooled it through the hallway like she was laying track for a toy train. We hit one more bump that I could live without, but that I'm telling you because it felt like the last little test the universe wanted to slide across the desk. Someone left a brown paper bag at Liz's door one afternoon. Inside was a framed picture of her and her ex from some past vacation. The glass cracked. There wasn't a note. Security pulled footage. He hadn't come in, not that they could see. It looked like maybe someone set it down and kept walking. There's a particular kind of tired I'd never known before this year that lives behind your eyes. We walked it back downstairs and gave it to our building manager, who tucked it away like she was putting away a knife. Liz filed it with the rest, and the judge converted the temporary order to a longer one the following week without so much as a hiccup. She's learning to live with the way the world narrows and widens around safety. We all are. There were bright seconds threaded in everywhere. My dad came over with 2 ties and asked me which one made him look less like a mortgage broker, and then cried at our living room table when I said the words father-daughter dance, and then pretended he'd gotten something in his eye and hustled into the kitchen to consider his reflection in the dark window above the sink. My fiancé's new project team scheduled in little pockets of predictable time so he could make our cake tasting and not live on texts in the back of Ubers. The doorman learned the names of 3 of my bridesmaids and started giving us pep talks when he saw me carrying anything that looked like it would fit into a spreadsheet. Liz and I bought a staple gun and copper pipes and tool and built an arch in our hallway big enough that it made the elevator look nervous. We have a rain plan that is not just hope. There's a tent rental company that pulled a miracle out of thin air and a meteorologist in our friend group who is so excited to be useful that he sends me updates with charts like he's auditioning for a very niche reality show. We walked up to the roof at sunset 2 nights ago and tested string lights, and I swear the city tried on a dress and asked us, "This one?" The building manager stood in the doorway with her arms crossed and said, "You two turned a headache into a brochure," and I took that as the highest compliment anyone has ever paid me. And because life insists on timing its plot twists like it's trying to win an award, we had a fire alarm last night. Not a real fire. Someone burned something on 12. We all trooped down the stairs in pajamas, neighbors yawning into sleeves, me in a ridiculous robe I'm still mad at myself for buying because it has feathered cuffs and I wore it like I've been cast as woman who lounges in a black and white movie. We ended up on the sidewalk in a little shaggy semicircle. The air was cold and smelled like soap and somebody's dinner. The doorman came outside in his jacket and made jokes about how he was going to start selling cocoa. My fiancé put his arm around me in a way that left no space at all, and Liz leaned her head on my other shoulder and said, "I'm so tired," like it was a confession. On the curb, a brand new mail bin sat with a stack of our reply cards inside, tied with string because the postal worker said he didn't want them to fly into the street if someone sneezed. It was such a small thing, a stack of envelopes that had held other people's handwriting and decisions and joy, and it grounded me like a hand-on. A dervish. When the alarm finally shut off and we all filed back in, a neighbor I barely know, a woman I've only ever seen hurrying in heels with her keys out, touched my arm and said, "The roof will be beautiful." I had my birthday up there with 6 friends and a cake, and no one fell off. It was the weirdest, sweetest benediction. If you're reading this hoping for a neat bow, I don't have it yet. We aren't on the other side of the roof ceremony. There are still cables to run and chairs to count and a tent to pray over. There's still the way my heart lurches when an unknown number calls or when the elevator stops half a foot below the floor and my brain decides to produce a short film about disaster. There are also vows written in notes, app drafts, and the knowledge that we're already married in the way that matters, which makes everything else feel like the party it's supposed to be. There's a friend who fell apart, and is putting herself back together, not in secret, but with a weird kind of public courage that I didn't know I would ever get to witness so closely. There's me, learning to say, I need this, and not flinching while I wait to see what happens. I don't know if crazy is the right word anymore. It's more like it's been very human, very loud, very painful, and very funny in pockets, and the noise of it has eased into something we can carry. If you stood behind our building and looked up as the lights blinked on across the roof tonight, you might think, there's a wedding in there. And you'd be right. There's also a handful of people who decided to keep choosing each other as the room filled with smoke and alarms and paperwork and string lights. There's me, getting used to seeing my new last name in print and learning to waltz without apologizing after every step. There's a roof, waiting, and there's the knowledge that whether we say those words under a tent or under a sky that's decided to behave, they'll still mean what we meant them to mean in a quiet chapel with 4 pumps singing backup. This is my person, and this is the life we're making, and this is us, in the middle of it, choosing it again.